Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Connect, Elder to Elder Conversations. Today, we're going to explore evangelism, sharing our faith with people who are broken and in need of hope.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to the E2 Effective Elders podcast. Visit us at e2elders.org, and please share this good word with others.
Hey, welcome everybody to yet another episode of Connect, Elder to Elder Conversations. And as always, our thanks to CDF Capital for their continued generosity to us so that we can have these conversations as they invest in elders across the country and literally around the world. Today, we welcome two, not one, but two church planters in the greater Chicagoland area. We've got Danny Cox leading at LifeWell, a Christian church, back with us again. He's in Crown Point, Indiana, and we introduced to you for the first time Matt Reece. And Matt is at Rise Church in Dyer, Indiana. They're just minutes from one another in the upper northwest corner of Indiana. Brothers, it's good to have you with us today.
Yeah, great to be here.
Well, it's good. And I am grateful that we're going to have this conversation about evangelism, as we focus all of 2021 on the 6 challenges facing elders, ELDERS, evangelism. The two of you are consummate church planters in the upper corner of our state. And it's a privilege that the two of you are leading partner churches of E2. And, Matt, I had the privilege of being with you just a couple of weeks ago on site for the first time. And your story intrigued me. Could you give us the Reader's Digest condensed version of your journey, not with Jesus, but to Jesus, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't grow up in a necessarily Christian home, but, as a child, we went to church. But when my parents started having trouble in their marriage and they went to the church basically told them that there's something wrong with them and they need to go fix themselves. Mm-hmm. And I often tell people, I've raised quite a few 3-year-olds, and that's still probably the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. And so I became a product of family who didn't want to go to church. And so you can just imagine what my life became as I dabbled in some of the things that we obviously wouldn't want our children to dabble in. I found myself homeless a couple of times, very much far, far from God. But what was interesting about being so far from God, that I was far from God, but God was pursuing me the entire time, because even though I wouldn't have called myself a believer, I would still, in the midst of all my struggles, reach out and have a conversation with God, which probably was more of less conversation and more me yelling at God and telling how things are right now. God was pursuing me even in the midst of my extreme dysfunction, and I still can't believe He was calling me to something greater. All throughout my life, I just sensed that there was more to life than whatever I was experiencing, and obviously being homeless and a lot of the negative things that went with that. It didn't take much to be better than that, right? But I always felt like God was calling me to something more. I found myself one day realizing I wanted to change careers, and I didn't know where to turn because I didn't have any male role models in my life. And so the pastor who performed the wedding ceremony for my wife and I happened to be at the church one day, and so I stopped in, and he started asking me, what do I value? And I just talked about helping people. And he said, oh, well, maybe you should become a pastor. And I said, Scott, you're going to have to forgive me because I hate everything about the church. I hate everything about your occupation. I'm the furthest thing from someone that God is going to call into ministry. He said, you know what? Keep an open mind. And he started praying for me. And I thought, oh my goodness. And I look back and, God started doing some supernatural things. And I really was feeling like maybe God's trying to tell me something. Now, if you've always been close to God and understand God and have a good theology of God, then what I'm going to tell you probably doesn't make sense. But if you're a highly dysfunctional person like myself, maybe you can resonate with what I thought. So my thought was, okay, if this God is telling me that I have to go do this, I don't want to do it, but can I tell him no? And if I tell him no, does that mean I'm going to get cancer or, something bad's going to happen? So I was just in this predicament of, I don't even know who this God is. I'm angry at him. I'm angry at his church. I don't know. And so we'd have these conversations when something unique would happen. And finally, one day I told God, listen, I hear the people say they heard the voice of God. I don't even know what that would look like. So I remember telling him one night for a walk, I'm ignorant. I don't understand what your voice would sound like. I don't know how to hear what you're trying to tell me. God, you're going to have to put it right in front of my face. Like I'm going to have to hear an audible voice that tells me this is exactly what you want me to do. So I had that screaming match prayer one night as I was going for a walk. The next day I go to work, and this lady named Susie, I worked with at the time, and she worked in the lab and I worked in sales. Now Susie could whoop me. We'll just say that. She certainly wasn't a frail flower of a woman. She was that's not that hard to do. No, she was far more manly than me, I'm going to tell you that. So Susie comes up behind me, and I can hear in the background, so I kind of turn around to tell her good morning. And I'm not going to use the words she used because there's a lot of profanity, but you can imagine she said, so what's your deal this morning? And I'm like, good morning to you too, Susie. And we started having dialogue, and she said, what's that stuff that's on your nose, in different language? And I'm like, I don't know. We worked for an ink company, and I tried to rub it off and I couldn't. And so finally she said, go to the bathroom and wash that stuff off your nose. So I did. And I go into the bathroom and I look, and apparently in the middle of the night, I think I'd scratched my nose. So it was kind of red, dry skin. So I tried to put some lotion type soap on it, which only made it worse. So now I go back to the desk area with Susie. My nose is bright red. And I've got this like little weird cross thing on my nose. And so I just sit back down. I'm like, I don't know, Susie. I scratch at my sleep. Anyway, how can I help you today? And so she started talking. In the middle of her talking, she stopped and just said, you know what? I always thought you should be a pastor. And then got up and walked out. Didn't even finish her conversation. And in the moment, I was a little dumbfounded. And then it dawned on me, God, you got to put it right in front of my face. I have to hear an audible voice from you. Oh my goodness, you can use me because you spoke through Susie Phillips. This is crazy. You know, I've had the privilege of going back and telling Susie how God used her to kind of reaffirm that he was calling me to something. Because I tell you, being somebody who was so far from God, there was no way I would have heard that voice. So God did some other supernatural things that led me to another pastor. And I just sat in his living room, and he said, hey, I want you to come help with youth group. I'm like, dude, I don't know anything about God. I don't know anything about the Bible. And he said, yeah, please don't talk to them about stuff like that. You're a jock. Play sports with them. Direct them to me. So I did. But I heard him over and over again each week preach the love of Jesus. And he thought he was talking to all those students, which he was, but no doubt he was talking to me. And so I remember going to a conference as like a youth sponsor, whatever that meant at that time. And I heard Mark Moore preaching, and he was telling the story of Phineas. And he got to the end of his sermon, and he's screaming out in this auditorium full of junior high kids, calling them to something greater. He says, Phineas, where are you? And I remember being in the back row, second seat in, sitting right next to Ryan, who was a student minister. And I just stood up, right here I am. I'm like, okay, God, I think you just confirmed that you're not only calling me into a relationship with you, you're calling me into full-time service so that I can reach a lot of highly dysfunctional people like myself. It's been quite a journey watching God interact with someone as highly dysfunctional as myself.
So you finally gave your life to Christ, and you then said yes to the ministry.
I gave my life to Christ second week in November. Back in 2000, I baptized my wife the next week. The following week, we stood in front of the congregation. They prayed over us because I said, I've got to go tell as many people the simple truth that I just discovered. We visited the college campus the first Thursday in January at Johnson University and came back, put our house on the market, sold our cars. We kept our kids. We took them with us. We headed out to college to try to figure out what is this Bible? Who is this God? Because I've got to give my life to him.
What an incredible story. And, you know, I enjoy it today just as much as I did 2 weeks ago. And it tells me again and again that our God is sovereign, that Jeremiah 29, verse 11, I have plans for you, not to harm you, but to give you hope in a future. And how true that is of Matt Reece. And, you know, why I enjoy the two of you so very much is Jesus sent them out 2 by 2. He trained us. He called them to be fishers of men. He trained them up and he sent them out 2 by 2. And it's pretty obvious that the two of you have been called by Jesus, and he sent you out to be fishers of people. And, Matt, whether you're connecting with homeless people in the Chicagoland area or people, as you keep saying, that are highly dysfunctional, why don't you two tell us what if you had elders of other churches sitting with the two of you for lunch, what would be some of your words of coaching, of encouragement, of challenge that you would share with elders of other churches when it comes to this E word, evangelism?
Sure. For me, I'll use the verse that you just said, how we are called to be fishers of people. We planted our church 2.5 years ago now. In fact, we're brothers. We planted with the same church plant organization, Ignite Church Planting. Mm-hmm. And Matt, to this day, lets me know that he beat me by 1 week. His church launched literally 1 week before mine did. Uh-huh. And again, we're kind of competitive brothers, so it works out that way. But when we launched, for me, good evangelism is good discipleship. Mm-hmm. He used the verse that we're to go out and be fishers of people, be fishers of men. I love, my church has used Jim Putnam's real life discipleship as far as defining what discipleship is. I think a lot of the congregations, the Great Commission, we are to go out and make disciples of this world, of all nations. If you were to ask your congregations what a disciple is, if there's 100 people in a room, odds are you might get 100 different definitions of what a disciple is. And I love how in real life discipleship, it breaks down exactly what a disciple is. Jesus says, come and follow me and I will make you fishers of men. And so we believe that a disciple is one who answers the calling, that we follow Jesus, that we're being changed and transformed like Jesus. We want our people to know that God's desire for you in your life is to be more like Jesus today than you were yesterday, and be like Jesus more tomorrow than you are today. And then the third, basic definition, what is to be a disciple, is to follow after the commission of Jesus, to be in mission with him. And so we want to develop disciples, people who follow Jesus, people who are being transformed daily by him, and people that pursue the mission of Jesus. And I think if you can mobilize your congregations, get them all on the same page of exactly what a disciple is, and realize that a disciple of Jesus Christ isn't just one that comes and sits in a chair on a Sunday morning, but is involved in the mission of Jesus. I think that is huge. I really think good evangelism is solid discipleship.
That's a powerful statement. Good evangelism is solid discipleship. Matt?
Yeah, I'd probably, I'll go a different route. You use the Bible, since I don't know the Bible. I think if I were to speak to elders, I think there's two things I'd probably focus on. I would hope they already have a good theology and understand the Great Commission and what they're called to do. But, I think, at least from my experience in the past with elders, sometimes they look at it as if they're to lead the people and encourage them to go and do. And I think, elders need to recognize as well that they are called to therefore go. They're not just called to shepherd. They are to go by example. And so I would speak to them. I would expect, to talk to them. I would want to talk to them about their own individual interaction with evangelism. So the two things I would tell them is, one, I think a lot of times our greatest qualification in evangelism, it's not necessarily, it's not only our theology and what we know about Scripture, but it's the journey that we've taken to get there. It's out of who we are. Who we are is based off a lot of what we've done and what God has set us free from. And that becomes one of our greatest weapons to use for the kingdom, because we're able to use our past to connect with other people. And so I think it's important to know our own story in such a way that we can communicate it, but we need to know our own story in such a way so that we can connect it to other people who have the same dysfunctions we have. In my life, I can think a lot of dysfunctions that I've experienced, and not everybody I've encountered experiences the same dysfunctions. Just a little over a year ago, we had a transgender person that started coming to our church. I've never struggled with that, right? But my mom, who struggled with homosexuality, has been married to 2 other women. I understood that journey. So I was able to resonate and connect with this guy. He came to our church praying because the next day he was going to have surgery to become a woman. And I remember that story. It's just crazy. And, over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks, I was able to pour into him, spend a lot of time in him, help him understand his identity, because he wasn't weird to me, because I have my own dysfunction. So it was okay to use my experiences to connect with him, and was obviously able to lead him out of that, baptize him, help him to understand who he is in Christ.
Yeah, praise be to God.
Yeah, I think one of the things, is who we are and what we've come out of qualifies us, I think, to minister to people like us. And then the other thing I would say is, we need to expect that evangelism is going to be messy. It's not always going to be.
Yeah.
If we're always looking for the little sin person and try to lead them, okay, but sometimes God wants us to reach people, and the people we're going to reach, they don't always understand things. They're like me, they think if I don't respond to God, he's going to kill me. They don't have a formed theology, so it's going to be messy, and it's not instantaneous. I love that about God, that salvation is like this, but the pursuit of holiness, it's a lifelong journey. People don't clean up their act like that. They get saved like that. And it's a journey of walking with people. And I think that's a key thing of evangelism.
Yeah, what a powerful statement.
Also recognize it. It's going to be messy, and be willing to get your hands dirty.
Yeah. Well, it's very inspirational for me, as well as people who are listening and or watching, to the story that both of you have. You are really empathizing with broken people. You are in this enormous metropolitan area. Chicago spills over the state line into Northwest Indiana.
Right.
And I believe that the two of you have a double portion of compassion and empathy. And that's what is bringing such power to both of your ministries. You want to draw alongside and stay alongside people who are broken, who are far from God, and are looking for the hope that only Jesus Christ can offer. Your statement, Danny, about we've got to have a solid discipleship if we're going to have effective outreach, evangelism. It's very, very important. The statement then too, Matt, when you mention about elders leading by example, how can I lead or teach others in the church to share their faith if I myself am not doing so? I can't take somebody where I myself have not been or am not. That's pretty important. Now, one thing before we're running out of time, before we end our conversation, the two of you, as I made mention of in the introduction, are planting churches, which tells me, and perhaps those who are listening and or watching, you don't have any elders. They're in your respective congregations, right?
Correct. Right now.
Okay. Right now. So why don't both of you tell us what it is that you're doing about that?
Sure. Well, I'm probably just a step ahead of Matt, just a little farther.
But I did launch first.
He did launch first. So I started this relationship. I've been on the podcast before. Started this relationship with Gary almost a year ago now.
Almost a year.
Almost a year ago, as far as when we were being connected. And then through that, I went through a recruiting process where I recruited 11 other men to start a biblical leadership journey is kind of what we have called it. And so for me, with these 11 guys, we started last September. We meet every other week, and we've been going through a lot of E2's material, from lead to reflect to the call of eldership, even enjoying his people. And then intermixed with it, we've been going through
our core 4 books.
Core 4. And we're on our last book right now, actually. And so through this whole entire process, we have looked at it as a discipleship process. Our guys throughout the entire time have known that just because you go through this does not mean at the end of this, you are going to be an elder, our first elders of LifeWell. But we're hoping through this time that there will be a few of the 11, we're praying 3 or 4 that will feel the call from God to step forward where they might be willing to pursue eldership here at LifeWell. Now, just because they feel the call, at least in their life, that doesn't, again, automatically make sure that they're an elder. Starting in July, we'll be meeting with these individuals. We'll be meeting having more training, a time where we get together with their spouses. And then we're really hoping at the end of it for us, either at the end of this year, that we at LifeWell are going to be laying hands and ordaining our first elders here at LifeWell. So for us, from start to finish, it's probably going to be, a 15 to 18 month process. Like this isn't like some guys that we recruited and then several weeks later we're good. Like a year and a half to 2 years almost of recruiting, training, and going into this before we lay hands on the first elders of LifeWell. And so we're hoping for us, it's going to be by the end of this year. Yeah.
Praise be to God. That's powerful. And Matt, you're at LifeWell today, this afternoon, spending time with Danny.
Basically, we're on the same journey. We're just behind where he is. He invited me to come over a couple months ago. And, Gary, you were here and you were doing your talk called A Few Good Men and talking about biblical eldership. And so I brought another one of the guys in our church that I would consider one of our future leaders with us. And both of us left going, man, this is good. And we knew we were excited about the opportunity to start our process. And so we are very early on in the process here. We've met with you already, but probably in the fall, we're going to start meeting regularly, and hopefully within a year, fall of 2022, our training process will be completed. We'll appoint our first elders. And, for us, we've known that elders, it's significant because I think one of the things you say, and correct me if I'm not going to say it the right way, but, if we do it God's way, we won't, there's going to be success there. We got to do it his way though. And so, for us, we just want to make sure that we're drawing in the right people. We're excited about having E2 as one of our partners. Danny and I, it's kind of interesting. We have the same partners, the same Ignite Church planting, the same partnership with, Solomon Foundation, now connecting with E2. And so I think we're just really set up for success. So I'm excited about the future we have and what E2 bring to the table, helping us get our first set of elders.
Well, and I believe with all of my heart that the two of you are leading churches that are becoming modern day Thessalonica's. When Paul said, only to the church in Thessalonica, you have become a model to all of the believers throughout Macedonia and Achaia. And Rise Church and LifeWell Church, both of them are modern day Thessalonica's, a model to all of the churches throughout that part of Indiana and beyond. So we're grateful for the partnership. I'm looking forward to being back in your area. So Danny, I'm going up to Matt's place to work on vision, mission, values. So while I'm up there, I should stop in. I owe you a steak dinner, by the way. So anyway.
I've earned it.
All right.
Yes, you've earned it. So have you played golf yet today, the two of you?
I did, yeah.
You, of course. That's your therapy. So
I have therapy,
And what was your score today?
It was a windy day. I shot 2 over. It was a windy day. Yeah. So
incredible.
Don't play golf with this guy or recruit for your scramble team.
Yeah, absolutely.
The best pastors I've ever met. It's ridiculous.
A fundraiser. Well, brothers, thank you so very much. The two of you are a blessing to the kingdom of God.
As are you.
Talk to you later.
Thank you so much.